Evening, Chief.
There's Michelle.
Good evening, everybody. How is everybody?
All right, and we are live.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dallas. If I could have my first slide and then my second one. So tonight we are here for a virtual live stream neighborhood meeting for a proposed annexation at 8809 Nelson Road. In terms of the agenda, up here on the screen, introductions. My name is Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson. I'm a principal planner here with the City of Longmont's Development Services Department. With us from the city this evening are Josh Sherman, our Public Works Natural Resources Engineering Administrator, and Chief Michelle Goldman, who is the Assistant Chief Michelle Goldman, who is our Fire Marshal, who will be speaking about public safety, any public safety questions that come up. From the applicant team, we had Jim Chanin from Chanin Development and Jim Brostowitz, who is the civil engineer working on this site. And as always, we couldn't do this without Dallas Stiles, who is our digital and video live stream specialist, who is running the show and making sure everything goes smoothly. So this is a live streamed meeting, and what that means is we are basically live broadcasting this neighborhood meeting on YouTube, where it is being recorded, so it will be available for future viewing on the City of Longmont's YouTube channel. So if you have any neighbors who weren't able to attend, or if you want to rewatch some things, it will be available for quite some time on the city's YouTube channel. The way this will work is city staff and the development team will go through their presentations. I will give an overview of the process and just general policy considerations. I will then turn it over to the applicant team for their presentation. Once the applicant team has finished their presentation, we'll take a 5-minute break. There will be a slide up on the screen that has call-in information. And during that 5-minute break, you can call in and get in the queue to speak and ask questions of the city and the applicant team. The city staff and the applicant team will respond to your comments and questions as well. So at that point, we would then conclude the meeting, and you will have our contact information if any future questions arise. Next slide. So in terms of the project and process, this is a proposed annexation of property over in West Longmont. A pre-application meeting was held with the Development Review Committee in late last year on August 30th. The item was heard by City Council in terms of doing an annexation referral at their May 14th meeting. An annexation referral is basically where the City Council takes a look at the proposal and says, yes, they should submit a full application for annexation. So at this point, we don't yet have a full application in. We require that a neighborhood meeting be held prior to submittal of a formal application for annexation or for any other major development application. Following this neighborhood meeting, the applicant team will be able to submit their application, which would then be reviewed by members of the Development Review Committee, who would be looking at a wide variety of issues such as access, any particular impacts of the sort, and how to deal with that, and working to put together an annexation agreement as well. Ultimately, there are public hearings held by Planning and Zoning Commission with final decision by City Council. So this is not your only opportunity to ask questions. We do require that public notice be made via mailed notice and posted signs on the property at the application receipt time. So once the city has determined that the application is sufficient for review, a notice will be made that there is an application under review. Once it is scheduled for Planning and Zoning Commission, you would also be notified that it is scheduled to be held, to have a public hearing held by Planning and Zoning Commission. There's an opportunity for public comment at that. And then there's also a public hearing before City Council where the final decision is made. So there are going to be quite a few opportunities for members of the community to speak and make comments and ask questions aside from just this meeting. Following annexation, so annexation is really, it's the first step. We don't have all the information at this point because this is really the first step. First, we have to get a property into the city before we can start working on the details of exactly what form the development would take. So typically you would see applications following annexation for plat, for site plans, and for public improvement plans. So annexation is really just the very first step. We may not have all of the information at this point and all of the questions at this point, simply because the development plans are still being fleshed out quite a bit as well. So with that, next slide. So the property in question is this yellow box with a red star. It is located at 8809 Nelson Road. So it is northeast of the intersection of Nelson Road and Airport Road. It's approximately 9.65 acres. It has a designation on Envision Longmont, the city's comprehensive plan, as mixed use employment. The applicant team would be seeking the mixed use employment zoning for an attached residential product. In this area, in this particular zoning district, there is a minimum density of 18 units per acre. So we would probably be looking at something in that range. Mr. Channon will be giving an overview of really what they're looking at and can talk a little bit more to that as well. So that's just a quick overview of what's allowed and what they can do. So next slide. So this property is within the Longmont planning area. State statute requires that a piece of property have 1/6 of its perimeter contiguous to a city boundary in order to be eligible for annexation. In this case, the property has 75% contiguity to the city of Longmont. So 3 of the 4 sides are bordered by the city of Longmont. And I'll get to this a little bit more. This area, if you were at City Council or watched City Council from a few weeks ago, where we talked about some of the airport zoning issues that have come up, this is not within the area that is proposed, that is being proposed for consideration for additional rules for development. So it's not within that area. Next slide. So this property, 8809 Nelson Road, is part of a larger county enclave. This unincorporated county area is outlined in red on this map. The star indicates the subject property. It is within the Longmont planning area and what is called the potential annexation area, as identified and defined by our intergovernmental agreement with Boulder County. Section 4G of this intergovernmental agreement with Boulder County, which I will add was approved by City Council. It was also approved by the Boulder County Commission. So it's been through quite a bit of review by both parties. 4G states that the city agrees that county enclaves within the potential annexation area should be brought into the city to ensure adequate facilities and services are provided and to ensure that any future development is consistent with the goals and policies of the city. So essentially what this means is don't sprawl out, fill in, and that's the case here. So next slide. So as I noted, there was discussion a few weeks back at City Council regarding some proposed amendments to the airport influence overlay map and overlay zone district. What you'll see, it looks kind of like a paddle in the red and yellow hatching. Those were some of the proposed areas for further definition. 8809 is outside of that proposed zone B, so it would not be impacted by those proposed changes. So while it's not within that area, within that zone, it is close enough to the airport where we would require what is called a navigation easement, which basically is a type of disclosure that essentially states and puts property owners on notice that they are close to an airport and they should know that there will be potential impacts from airport activities. So we would require an navigation easement and disclosures for potential property owners and any other users of the property. Next slide. So Envision Longmont has this area designated as mixed use employment, which is that orange and gray hatching. You'll see the red star, that is the subject property. Next slide. So the mixed use employment category is essentially intended for higher intensity employment oriented uses, but it also allows for supporting commercial uses and higher density residential uses. So the idea is to have an area that has a variety of uses and services that are complementary of each other. Residential uses are allowed as what we call a secondary use. And within the mixed use employment, as I mentioned earlier, the minimum density is 18 units per acre. Next slide. So one other thing to note is this particular area is identified in the Envision Longmont Comprehensive Plan as an area of change. So the red areas on this map are areas of change. The yellow are areas or what are considered areas of stability. The green star is the property in question. So it is within one of these areas of change. Next slide. So basically what an area of change means is it is either going to be an undeveloped area planned for future development or developed areas with potential for infill or redevelopment. In this particular case, the area of change would be relevant because this is an undeveloped area planned for future development. So that is what we are considering this evening. Next slide. With that, I will turn it over to Jim Channon and Jim Brostowitz for to discuss their project in a bit more detail.
Well, it is. Thank you. Yeah. So Jim Brozovich is our civil engineer who's going to be going through the slides with us, which is very briefly. It's so early in the process, we don't have a lot to show the public at this point. This is just annexation, so there really isn't much detail or any detail rather through the plans themselves. Yeah.
So some of these slides are duplicative of what Jennifer already prepared, but really this is just a representation. The brown rectangle here is our site. It is in the comp plan Envision Longmont as mixed use employment, as Jennifer already mentioned. Next slide, please. So this is an infill, as she also mentioned. This is surrounded by development, some of which is in the county, which is the Schlegel subdivision. And just to be clear, there was a slide earlier that showed the county enclave. We are not intending or have no intention of annexing the Schlegel subdivision. This is only for the green box on this site, the Nelson Road property. And we have Modern West, which is planned to the northwest, that has been annexed and is in various phases of development review. The storage place northeast is in the town or in the city. Obviously, that's built. To the east, we have a residence and the vet clinic that is in the county and will remain in the county unless that property owner decided to annex. Of course, the Schlegel subdivision directly south, and we have townhome product already built at the southwest. Next slide, please. So one of the reasons we like this site is because it does have proximity to existing and developing pedestrian and transit infrastructure. This map is taken from the city of Longmont's bicycle plan, and the purple lines indicate designated bike lanes that are existing. The orange lines show some wider sidewalks along Airport Road there. And then during the annexation referral, it was brought to our attention that the city is actually planning a bus stop somewhere in this general area within walking distance of this site. So that really meshes well with the higher density residential use that would be planned for this site. Next slide, please. So this is our plan. Right now, it like Jim said, it really doesn't show any detail. What we are trying to do at this point is make sure that development of some sort will be allowed. We are planning on residential. The MUE does allow different uses, but this project is coming forward with an intent to do residential. What this graphic shows is we think there will be a couple of stormwater areas in the green with the green dots at the east, southeast, and maybe the northeast corner of the property. That'll be a detention pond of some sort. The purple area is the area that will be developed with residential use. And there's a gray crosshatch area on the south side, which is some right of way that will be dedicated to the city to allow for future widening and improvements along Nelson Road. One feedback we did get from the city during our pre-application meeting was that the access point to this site should line up with Schlegel Street, which is what we're showing there on the south with the blue dot. There will also need to be an emergency access, a secondary access probably, maybe only open to emergency vehicles. At this point, we're thinking it will be on the west side along that north-south strip that is part of Modern West. We have not actually coordinated any of that with Modern West yet, but that is our intent right now. Like I said, there's a lot of details that we need to work up, but based on this project area, we would need to get 172 units to hit the minimum required density for the site. So that sounds like a big lot. We have 10 acres with 172 units, but it ends up being relatively small lots once you take out the stormwater areas and the roads and common areas, landscape and stuff like that. So it's a dense product with small lots or stacked units. That's actually the end of the applicant presentation. Jim, do you have anything else to add?
No, with that, I'd love to hear what anyone has if anyone has some questions.
Great. Thanks, Jim and Jim. I can have my next slide. So again, just to recap what the next steps would be following this particular neighborhood meeting, the applicant would make a formal submittal and to the city of Longmont. The development review committee would review the application and make a recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Planning and Zoning Commission would then hold public hearings and make a recommendation to City Council, who is the decision-making body. Again, there would be public notice as well as public hearings before both Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. If City Council approves this annexation, there would then be subsequent applications and reviews as the development details become more fleshed out and become better developed. Next slide. So if City Council approves this annexation, subsequent applications would be likely it would be a preliminary plat if the threshold for that is met. So we do require a preliminary plat if if more than 3 new lots are being created on a site. If it does not meet that threshold, if there are 3 or fewer new lots being created, then it would go to a minor subdivision plat. Regardless, some sort of platting action would be needed. And then we would also review site plans and public improvement plans. Public improvement plans are the detailed engineering plans that outline where all the pipes, where all the infrastructure is going to be, what public improvements as far as road improvements, transportation improvements, any additional public infrastructure improvements would be needed. So annexation is really the very first step in what is ultimately a pretty long process. So with that, next slide. And then the following slide. So it's time for public comment. Do have some ground rules for public comment. So we follow City Council rules of 3 minutes per speaker. You will need to state your name and where you live. We do ask that you keep your comments and questions related to the current proposal. It's always nice if you can be additive and not repetitive, and be respectful of everyone who is participating. So with that, I will let Dallas talk about the call-in process.
Sure thing. So we're about to take a 5 minute break here. Callers, if you would call in now, the number that you need to call in is 1-888-788-0099. When you're prompted, enter the meeting ID 874-1184-4267. When that happens, you're going to get added into our queue. Again, for our 5 minute break, you're going to be brought in, but you're not going to be able to say anything. When we come back from that break, I'm going to address you by the last 3 digits of your phone number that you're calling in on. Okay, with that, callers, now is your time to call in. And for Jennifer and applicant team, we're going to take a 5 minute break. See you in a few.
Great, thanks, Alice.
Callers, we have about a minute left before we are going to start addressing you. If you are listening to me right now, make sure that you mute your live stream and that you're listening to me through the device that you're calling in on. That way we don't get a feedback loop from the live stream going through your device coming to us. With that, we have about 30 seconds and then we'll start taking calls. Thanks. All right, and with that, we are at our 5-minute timer. We are going to start taking some calls. So let me drop this slide quick. Great. All right, remember callers, I'm going to be addressing you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. And when I do that, I'm going to have you hit *6 on your device to unmute. With that, and once that happens, please state your name and address for the record. We're going to start with caller with the last 3 digits 036. Caller 036. If you would hit *6 on your device to unmute, please. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Snowden Campbell. I live at 9522 Schlegel Street. I have been here. Oh, I see that you're talking, but I don't hear you. Am I still good?
You're good. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. The screen doesn't line up. Okay. I have, before I moved here in December, I was 2 blocks away in Nelson Park for 10 years. I've been in Longmont for 23 years, all told. And I came here because it was quiet and peaceful and not crowded. So I'm struggling with all of this development. The long and the short of that is that I would like to see the city council vote against annexation. What I'm seeing is that I feel like the development is steamrolling and it's getting ahead of our supposed efforts at sustainability. Right now, it's already difficult to get out of Schlegel onto Nelson. And so with the addition of extra traffic, that means certainly we would need mitigation for that. I'm not sure what that would look like reasonably. And I have a few questions I want to throw out there. I know they'll get answered later. One is I'd like to know more about what secondary use means in relation to the possibility of residential development that Jennifer mentioned. And do areas of change in the development plan, must they change or can they remain unchanged? Can we keep some of our green areas in town and empty spaces? And then my one other question is, when will city council vote on annexation? And then I just wanted to say about the notification, I wanted to acknowledge that you met your requirements for notifying the public about this meeting. But I will say that 1,000 feet, it doesn't even come close to the number of people impacted by these developments, including this one we're talking about. And also that the sign that is posted is below street level. So unless you are a passenger in a car driving west, it's not visible. So that feels a little less than transparent. So while I thank you for the efforts, I think they fell short. And I appreciate you listening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go. Yes, we will be addressing questions towards the end. We're going to go to our next caller. Caller with the last 3 digits of their phone number 406. Caller 406, please hit *6 to unmute. Hello.
Hello, this is Diane McDaniel. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My home is at 9639 North 89th Street in unincorporated Boulder County, Schlegel subdivision. We have been here over 30 years when there was nothing but county property. Understand that there's development and things like this. But to correct Jennifer, she said that it's in West Longmont. The property is not in West Longmont. West Longmont's around the property. And I follow Snowden's. The fact that, we're talking about 1,000-foot notification, it impacts us all severely, just as the proposed development on Quail Road. So getting the word out to more people, where obviously if they had opened up the streets, the city streets into our county, it would have greatly impacted us. I would like to also share that the developer was saying, excuse me, that, you know, there's bike paths and everything else. Nelson Road, bike lane along Nelson Road is very narrow and very dangerous. So that's one of the concerns is, you know, everybody's thinking about, oh, there's all kinds of ways to come and go and on bicycles without vehicles. Nelson Road is extremely dangerous. You know, watching this explode in the last 30 plus years, actually the last 10, Nelson Road is extremely dangerous. And I don't know how, as they continue to develop to the west, the road is going to be safe. It's a nightmare. I actually have to turn on my headlights and my bright lights during the day to make sure I don't get hit when I'm trying to turn on to 89th. So obviously none of us, and I'm rambling, none of us are, you know, us people living in the country for so long are not into the development, but I just don't think the city is really thinking about the impacts it's having to even the city residents. So I'm going to stop my rambling. Obviously I'm kind of against, and I've talked to the owner of Nelson Road Veterinary and all that, and there's a lot of concerns that I don't know if he's going to bring them forth or not, but, and I know the people that used to own the property. So I will close with my rambling. So I really hope that the city really steps back and tries not to annex everything. And I sit on my back porch. I'll shut up after this. I sit on my back porch, and if I'm on a call, everybody's like, you live by an airport. I listen to all the city residents complain about the airport. We know it's here, but people moving in, the complaints are going to be crazy. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Diane.
Thank you.
We're going to go to our next caller now. Caller with the last 3 digits 532. Caller 532. If you'd hit *6 to unmute, please. Hello.
Hi, my name is Dina Schlitz. I am at 9767 North 89th Street in the Schlegel subdivision. And, you know, wanted to also say that the notice of 1,000 feet is not adequate. There's only 10 people on this call right now. So I think there's a whole lot more people that would like to be voicing their opinion, but didn't know about it. And I was wondering, first of all, the question for the city is what percentage of owner-occupied dwellings do you have as a goal versus rental? I understand that this may be a rental property long-term, and I was just wondering what your goal is on that. And then also, Colorado is now the 3rd most dangerous state, and I was wondering what Longmont's going to do about crime and police with this increased density. And obviously the schools are always a question. And then are you planning on putting in a traffic light right there at Schlegel? Because we already have, like Diane said, it's really hard to get out on Nelson Road, and it's, you know, kind of dangerous, especially during 3:30 when the kids are going to school down at Silver Creek. There's just a stream of traffic going that way. And then also I think that the city is really focused on just piling as many people on top of each other as they can versus focusing on some type of quality of life. I think when Leona Stacker was mayor, she really tried to focus on building a beautiful city. And I see it's now kind of just fallen apart, and it's being, you know, riddled with crime and roads that are not being maintained and schools that are overcrowded. And it just seems like things are kind of going to heck. So I would be against this until there's some better planning on police and security and parking and roads. And so that's all I have.
Thanks, Dina.
Thank you.
All right, and we're going to go on to our last caller. Caller with the last 3 digits 149. Caller 149. If you'd hit *6 to unmute, please. Hello.
Hi, yeah, this is David Kimmett, and I reside at 9536 Schlegel Street in Longmont. Can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, go for it, David.
Okay, great, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity tonight to listen to the developer and as well to the presentation. Jennifer, thank you for that. Along with what Dina, Diane, and Snowden have mentioned, I too have some concerns as a resident of the Schlegel neighborhood, and then just generally for Longmont as a whole in this portion of the city. So I am a cyclist, a road cyclist, and kind of to piggyback along what Diane mentioned, the bike lanes along Nelson are some of the narrowest and most dangerous in the city. And certainly there is a proposed expansion of Nelson as outlined in the concept plan that the developer presented. But Nelson is not conducive to cycling, and so it shouldn't be considered that that is a safe means of transportation at this time. And I'd like to see what Vision Zero opportunities could be incorporated into this proposed development, especially since it's proposed at quite a high density of a minimum of 18 units per acre. I have some curiosities from the developer. The developer had mentioned that it could possibly be small lots, or it could be a stacked form, which would I assume that means apartments. I'd like to see something in the form of small lots. That would be something that could present an ownership model. As two of the city council members had mentioned during the referral process, they were deeply concerned that we are not offering opportunities for first-time homeowners, condominium owners, just property owners to enter the market. We are catering towards large real estate investment trust ownerships of apartment buildings and not thinking about the next generation as a city. And that is deeply concerning. My two kids, who are 18 and 22 years old, will not be able to live in Longmont. They already know that. They've resigned to not being able to afford to live in Longmont unless they live in an apartment. I'm not certain what kind of community we're building when we decide or resign ourselves to, hey, we're going to be the apartment community. So I'd like to ask of the city and also of the proponent of this development to take a strong look at an ownership opportunity model for this. Last, I'd like to mention that with the density that's proposed, Nelson should not be the only ingress egress point. It is not sufficient level of service on Nelson, and I consider that to be a dangerous model for the city to allow this level of density to have one ingress and egress. An emergency on the west, sure, that's fine, but I think there should be some sort of potential nexus with South Anderson Street maybe. And I know that would involve possibly condemning the northern portion of the vet clinic property, but at least Anderson is set up for an ingress egress to the big subdivisions being built to the west of Target and Home Depot. And a traffic light is probably long overdue for that intersection. It's dangerous, as Diane
Hey, David, do you
alluded
mind
to.
finishing that thought?
Yep.
Great.
It's dangerous to access Nelson Road at this juncture as either a cyclist or a driver. So I urge the city to really examine the ingress egress potential for this quite dense subdivision. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, and with that,
I lost your audio, Dallas.
take it away.
All right, so just in terms of order, I will address the city's the questions for the city with assistance from Chief Goldman and Josh Sherman. And then I will kick it over to Jim and Jim to speak from the developer standpoint for those questions. So in terms of when will the city council vote, I don't have an answer for you on that. we don't have an application under review yet. We don't know how many review cycles it will require. Typical time frame for annexations from application to final decision at city council. I always estimate 9 to 12 months is a safe bet. And a lot of that is a function of statutory requirements for public hearing and time between public hearings and such. So it will be probably early next year at the earliest before city council takes action on this item. In terms of what does secondary use mean? So a secondary use is basically considered technically a subordinate use. Our policy is that secondary uses cannot make up more than 50% of the total land area in a given contiguous area of a particular zoning or envisioned Longmont designation. So basically that doesn't mean that each secondary use can take up to 50%. It means that all secondary uses together cannot make up more than 50% of the total land area. So we want those, primary type uses to really dominate, but we do allow secondary uses as a way to have a more robust, supportive, mixed community. So the question also is, can areas of change not change? Ultimately, that's a question for the market, and a question for, as we go through development review processes. We've identified these areas as, this was done as part of the Envision Longmont planning process, which Envision Longmont was adopted in 2016. So that's been in effect for about 8 years now. So it was done as part of that process, and it really identified kind of where we want to see growth and development and redevelopment happen. So ultimately, it is the city is not the developer on this. We do rely on private developers for the most part to bring proposals to the city, and we then evaluate them both based on compliance with our codes, with our standards, with our comprehensive plan, etc. So it's not really a crystal ball as far as can they change or can they not change. There are a lot of it depends in that. As far as what percentage of owner-occupied housing is the city's goal, we don't really have an adopted goal on that. And it's really kind of a, it's hard to set that kind of target, especially these days, given interest rates what they are, given land costs. A lot of what's driving housing costs in Longmont is that we have had extraordinarily low vacancy rates for quite some time. Less than 5% for a number of years. The last few years we were under 2% vacancy, which is an unsustainably low, considered a very unsustainably low vacancy rate. And that does serve to drive up costs of housing when there just isn't that supply. And that applies to both rental and for sale product. So in terms of our for sale, our owner occupied vacancy rate, I think it's fair to say that's been under 1% for a long time. We just don't have a lot of turnover in our owner occupied products. Even our rental products in the city of Longmont have been under 5% vacancy for quite some time. The city is still dominated by single family units. It's there's a perception that it's all apartments going up. And that might be the case now. It historically was dominated by single family. So we are starting to see more of a mix of unit type. So, and that's something that will evolve over time as well. Finally, before I kick it over to some other members of our team, the school question, we're in communication with St. Vrain Valley School District representatives pretty regularly. And the feedback we've been receiving from them for the last several years is that schools in Longmont, the public schools in Longmont actually have quite a bit of capacity. So they really aren't concerned about the schools in Longmont becoming overcrowded. And that's what we're hearing directly from the school district. So I don't think that's too big of a concern at this point. With that, Josh, would you like to talk about Nelson Road and some of the transportation improvement requirements and bike lanes and all of that? Our Vision Zero representative is not here this evening, but Josh, you can probably speak a little bit to that as well.
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. Good evening, everyone. Josh Sherman, civil engineer with Public Works. So a couple of questions I heard: access onto Schlegel Road. What would that look like? Potential signal at Schlegel Road and widening of Schlegel Road. So at this time, I'm not aware of any plans currently for a new traffic signal at the intersection of Nelson and Schlegel Road. As it's been mentioned a few times during this meeting, this is very early in the process, so we don't really have any data from the applicant, but one of the requirements for the annexation and for the development process will be a traffic study. The applicant will be required to, evaluate background traffic counts on Nelson Road and evaluate what their proposed access would do to the movements on Nelson Road, and we would use that to evaluate and determine what improvements might be required at that intersection at that time. So we're just a little early in the process to be able to give any sort of firm answers. We'll require some engineering data before we can make that evaluation. The city is going through a transportation traffic sort of update and study. Part of that is to include some Vision Zero evaluation as well. And so with that study, we'll include Nelson Road and some potential recommendations on really what that ultimate widening and cross section for Nelson Road will look like, as it was shown in, I believe, in the applicant's presentation. They'll be required to dedicate the right-of-way for that future expansion, as well as at a minimum provide the pedestrian connectivity, so the sidewalk along Nelson Road. But similar to some of the existing developments that are occurring a little further to the east, the ultimate widening will be determined a little bit later once we have some more information coming out of that future planning study. But I do expect, again, because of Vision Zero and multimodal, that it will include some improvements to all modes of access, including the bike lane along Nelson Road. I think I also heard some questions about secondary access. One of the comments that Public Works had during the pre-application meeting was that this development would need to plan for connectivity to the property to the east. Now, that doesn't mean that this property will necessarily have to make connectivity all the way to Anderson Street, but they would need to provide for that potential connectivity in the future. And, it's a little early in the process to tell exactly what that's going to look like. Is that an access easement? Is that right away? But we'll evaluate that as we see more information from the applicant. Checking my notes here. I was trying to take notes and jot down questions. I think I've covered most everything related to transportation in Public Works, but I'll be on if there's any follow-up needed. So thanks.
Great, thanks, Josh. And there is, I think it was mentioned that there is a transportation mobility plan update happening currently. So once we get to the end of everyone's responses, we'll throw up a slide that has that website, has the website for that particular plan on it. So you can provide feedback and get updates on where that is and engage with that process as well. Chief Goldman, would you like to add anything on the safety side? I know we can't really speak from the crime standpoint because we don't have the police here, but part of any development project is we do believe that development should pay for itself. So there are, that's where we get into paying various fees and such for development as well. So Chief Goldman.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Jennifer. And thanks everybody for participating. And I think Josh covered some of the access questions probably pretty thoroughly at this point. So taking my notes, I heard some questions about emergency access points and having an access point on Nelson. That's probably the primary point that they showed. With 172 units, they will be required to have 2 points of access. And they are showing an emergency point and their primary access point right now on Nelson. So I can't really give you a better answer other than to say 2 points will be required until we see the specific product and their site plan. And very big proponent of having development provide stuff for itself there so that it should be self-contained. So that includes things like parking and trash and playgrounds, et cetera, green space there. So we are looking to make sure that that happens. And that kind of leads us maybe into the crime question a little bit. So developments that have and provide those kinds of amenities tend to be small, very good communities. So we like to see that. We do have a crime-free division that will evaluate projects and work with different developments. So I think that would be a perfect appropriate use for that division here. As far as crime, I think that's fairly ambiguous because it's difficult to say. Now, calls for service, as we increase in population, we always see that direct correlation to increase in calls for service, whether it is crime related or emergencies for emergency medical, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say there's probably a correlation to an increase in calls for service. Crime, I would have to work on those projections with our partners in public safety over at police. So I can do that before we go to planning and zoning if that's something that the public's interested in.
Well, and the other thing I think is really important to note is that study that came out and rated Colorado as number 3 most dangerous. That really was looking statewide. It doesn't, I don't have the exact rates in front of me, but based on my experience, this is still a pretty low crime community. But those are statewide figures. So I think you probably have places like the Denver metro area and Pueblo and such kind of skew in Colorado Springs are probably skewing those numbers quite a bit as well. So, but again, I can't really speak to that. That is.
I would say the direct correlation would be in calls for service, whether it be crime related or not, but we can work on some more projections.
And those numbers that were referenced are rates per population. So,
Agreed.
It's kind of not an apples and apples situation. So with that, Jim and Jim, if you want to talk a little bit about the more developer specific items in terms of, I know the big question was ownership opportunities and the types of products that you're looking at and such.
Are all the callers still on with us?
No, they are not.
Oh, darn. But can they, I wanted them to.
They can hear you. They can absolutely hear you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because I see this more as like an ongoing conversation and not just a one-off meeting. I'd like to, I don't even know where to start. I wish I was taking notes, but I think you did, Jennifer. So maybe you can cue me. Maybe by saying that I'm a 38-year resident of this immediate area. So in that sense, this means a lot to me and I care, and I've done a lot of work in the city. I also, before I forget, want to remember someone mentioned Leona, and she was just a visionary leader of Longmont. And I remember working with her very well, both on a municipal level and on boards as well. She's just a phenomenal woman. I agree with so much of what everyone was saying. Ownership is important. We don't see this as, and this was echoed in city council. I don't know if the callers, heard the city council session we had, but they want this to be for sale and made that apparent. We've always seen this as a for sale product. Also at this point, I want the callers to know, I want the public to know that the 172 units is not being generated by us. That's being generated by the city's 18 dwelling units per acre minimum for this zoning district. We would like to see this be less dense as well. I also feel like the bike lanes are too narrow. I ride my bike a lot, and there's roads I just won't ride down. I mean, one of my son's best friends was hit and killed. Well, this is where we had a super wide shoulder on the diagonal, right just west of 63rd. Kid was headed on a phenomenal cycling career, this kid. It's just the saddest thing. And that's where we had a wide shoulder. So cycling has become dangerous around here, period. Oh, great, my computer. Trying to plug it in, darn it. About to run out of gas. But yeah, I want to agree with that gentleman that the bike lanes aren't wide enough. Cycling in general has become dangerous. It's nice to hear about the schools. Also concerned about police. Do we have enough police? So we'll definitely be taking a dive into that as well. Jennifer, help me. What am I missing?
I think you've covered it. I know, the big question is ownership opportunity and, product type. So I think the biggest thing is that it is very early, in this process. Jim indicated that, he would like to go lower density. So there are some routes where that could be done. But again, this is an ongoing discussion throughout the development review process. As well. So it's a matter of figuring out what works for everybody. So
it's just so early in the process, we can't know everything yet, but I just want these guys to hear that, like, I'm not a big corporation. I am not a REIT. I am a local guy. I hire local guys. The owner of the property who I'm doing this for has been my excavator. He dug my first hole when I went out on my own as a builder over 30 years ago. I mean, I'm still close with this family. And they asked me to, be their developer because they don't know, how to do this, with the city. And that's a really important part of the story too. Like, this is a family that I've known for decades and worked with and love. And I think that's an important part of the story too, that someone touched on that they knew the owners, and I just wanted to mention to her. So do I, and I really care about them. And I think this will be a really good addition. It's infill. We want to do the right thing. We want to do right by people. We want lower density. We want ownership, and we hear you. My doors, my door is open to you all the time, because again, this is. To me, I see it as an ongoing conversation and not just something I have to do because, it's a scheduled neighborhood meeting. That's all I got.
great. Well, thank you so much, Jim. Dallas, if you could post the contact information slide. So there's a few things on here. You have my information up here, Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson, my phone number, an email address. Jim Channon at jim@channondevelopment.com, his email and phone. I've also included a web link to what's called our Engage Longmont webpage that has that relates to the transportation mobility plan that's underway right now. So community feedback is always important on that. And that's how we do these processes. Yes, sir.
Just one more thing about the sign. I put that sign up myself, and I wanted to tell that woman that I apologize, but it has to literally be on the property, which puts it back and lower, and then we're given the legs that the sign goes on. So that limit, like, that's what I had to work with. So if that wasn't visible enough, I wanted to apologize to that lady. But that's the city sign, and that's literally what I had to use. So if she could forgive me for that, I would appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
And one other item I'd like to point out, we did the 1,000-foot mailings, and there was over 325 or 330 unique addresses. We had 4 people in my office stuffing envelopes. So I'm kind of surprised not more people called into this, but there were quite a few envelopes sent out. So 1,000 feet gets us pretty far from this site.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. Well, yeah, so again, this meeting will remain, the recording will be on the City of Longmont YouTube channel. Our contact information is posted. This slide will be posted as well. It's part of the presentation. So if you can't find our contact, if you didn't get our contact information written down, just hit the city's YouTube channel and get to this slide for it. So with that, like to thank everyone tonight. I'd like to thank the city team, Josh, Michelle, or Chief Goldman, and Dallas, and then Jim Channon and Jim Prostowitz from the applicant side. And with that, if you have any questions after the fact, feel free to reach out to us. So thank you so much and good night.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
good
Good
night.
night.